All right, so this is the slide that is on the screen while everybody's sitting down. You're probably a little bit nervous right now. It's probably best to put your Twitter up there. So at least in our industry, people like to tweet about, what's going to happen. One quick tactical thing before we get started. I use Caffeine app. If you click right here, the little coffee cup, I've got a link below. That keeps your screen bright, and that's great for doing podcasts, presentations, stuff like that. So you don't have to keep clicking your trackpad to keep it open. All right, so what do you say we get started? This is not going to be a very long presentation. Today we're going to be talking about how to present. Everybody knows TED Talks. Everybody knows that presentations are a great way to share your message, but I found it very difficult to create talks, and hopefully this talk will make it easier for you. I am not a guru, and I am not a professional speaker, and that's part of the reason why I feel the need to make this post. When I Googled around for how to make a presentation, when people were starting to ask me to speak at their events and I was speaking at my own, I wasn't finding the simple type of advice that I needed. I do have some experience though. Because I throw conferences that hundreds of entrepreneurs come to, I get some of the best in the business to speak, and I watch them. I've been taking notes furiously, and I'm trying to create a system here that can allow us to see similar kinds of success that they see. So here's what you'll get if you listen to today's presentation: a method for making presentations quickly. Quickly is my key thing, what I cared about. Concrete tips on how to keep it interesting, and a 16-slide template that you can copy. In fact, I'll embed a little tip here. I should have said, I'm going to save you time, help you make presentations quicker. I'm going to help you make them more interesting, and I'm going to give you the whole template so you can just download it and start making yours today. That's a simple way to make your slides a little bit more visually interesting and increase your slide velocity. So first, let me talk about the problem just a little bit more. I want to explain the problem so you understand exactly why you need to solve it. This is my business partner, Ian, and he's a busy president of a company. So he spends all week long, day in and day out, running a company. When someone asks him to speak at an event, it can be an incredibly taxing event. In fact, for this event, which happened in Bangkok a year ago, it took him 2 weeks to prepare his slides. And I wanted to help guys like Ian go from 2 weeks to like 2 hours. The presentation I'm showing you right now took me an hour to make, and I'll show you exactly how I made it. Also, it sucks when you go to a conference and you spend all of your time cramming in your hotel room, finishing your speech rather than hanging out with cool people. And I also wanted to help empower people like Peter Keller from Fringe Sport. Peter Keller he doesn't need my help. He gave one of the best talks at my last conference. And I've used a lot of the lessons I've learned from Peter in my framework. But what I wanted to help people with is most people that are watching this probably aren't professional speakers, and neither is Peter. And those are the people that are in some ways even the most interesting people to have speak, because you're building your story every day by growing your business, whatever it is that you do. Wouldn't it be great if you had a simple framework so you could just go out there and share your story like Peter did and inspire hundreds of entrepreneurs? All right, I've warped you into a presentation within a presentation. I want to show you exactly how these 16 slides can go to work for you so you can tell your story fast. And I'm going to tell a quick little story about a blog post that I wrote one time called Learn to Play the Guitar in 10 Hours. Let's imagine that someone from a school calls me and say, we'd love for you to come in and share this with our students. The old Dan might have said, hey, that's going to take me 2 weeks to make a presentation. But now I'm thinking, hey, I saw that video online about how to make presentations fast. Why don't I just try it out? All right, so I have all the slides numbered 1 to 16. Basically, you're going to remove my information and put in yours. So instead of having your title this, maybe put in a photo and a nice cover page like that. Not so nice, but nice. I'm sure you'll do a better job than me. All right, so you start off with, what are we going to learn? And what I want you to think about is I want you to delete my words and put in imagery that supports your story or your point. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to delete that, how to play some songs from your greatest artists and the amount of time it takes one to commute to work, spend a full day at the office, and commute back home. Why should you listen to me? Because I have no musical talent, yet I've managed to be on the radio and play in bands in front of hundreds of people. And I've taught a lot of my friends this technique that I use to play the guitar, even though I don't I wasn't born with a piano in my hands. Specifically today, you're going to learn how to play songs like Runaround from Blues Traveler and Accidentally in Love by Counting Crows and Country Roads by John Denver, among hundreds of other songs you could potentially play with the information I'm going to share with you today. But let me share with you the problem. So again, you're thinking about how you can, we're only at slide number 5, how you can remove this text and put in imagery that supports your points. The problem, by the way, if you're really in a tight spot for time, you could even like leave the problem and then sort of prompt you and then to put the imagery on the next slide. So the problem is that, you know, people say that you need to practice, have a teacher, that you need to learn to read music, you know, you name it, you need to have musical talent, all these kinds of things. But I found a simple solution, and here's what it is. I actually put in slides for this. You need to know these 5 shapes. They're very awkward. They make your hand hurt. You need to hold your hand in there for 10 hours. So basically it's a muscle memory thing. It's not a musical talent thing. It's just a mechanical thing. So here's the portion of the presentation. So again, you know, your solution could go on, it could be a story, or the problem in particular, you could tell stories about the problem depending on how long you have on stage. And I'll tell you how to determine that at the end. Okay, so now after we've presented our solution, we go to the before and after slide. And basically what this is a sequence of sharing what your life was like before you knew about the solution and after. So, you know, with the guitar thing, you know, before I couldn't get a date. After, now that I play guitar, I can get a date. Before I, you know, didn't realize the wonderfulness of being a musician and be able to jam with other people and be able to go to concerts and like understand what's happening. And now I have got all that. And before I thought, you know, it was gonna be hopeless for me and I was never gonna be playing a musical instrument. And now I play in a band and I'm on the radio and I play in a banjo club on the weekends. So you're at point 14, so slide 14. So you're towards the end of your talk now and people are probably ready to implement whatever you said. Now's the time to take a moment to step back and say, all right, so if you're going to do all this stuff, there are some common roadblocks that you want to look out for. With guitar, you want to make sure that you spend your whole entire 10 hours with your hand on the guitar, or else you won't get the muscle memory required. You want to make sure that you fret your notes very close to the fret, et cetera, et cetera. And if you still are feeling, pumped up about all this, here's specifically what you can do to take action on all the things that I taught you today. Your final slide is actually surprisingly important because it'll be up on the screen for 15 minutes or however long your Q&A is. So make sure that you put some useful information and some nice imagery there so that while you're answering for 15 minutes, people can go to a URL. I especially recommend putting a special URL where there's special information for the specific audience that you're talking to, as well as social media. All right, so what about timing then? I would recommend at a minimum 2 slides a minute. And what that's gonna mean is that with our basic 16-slide framework, you're gonna have an 8-minute presentation if you just fill out the basic slides. What if I told you this presentation uses the 16-slide format? So if you do your own thing, you can come back and look at this presentation and sort of see how I riffed off of these parts to create this presentation in an hour. Now, some of you might be thinking, all right, Dan, isn't this completely arbitrary? You said 2 slides a minute. 2 of the slides don't even have any talk over them because they're at the end. Isn't this completely arbitrary? And the answer is, yeah, it is arbitrary. It's just a handrail. This isn't a train track. You can do whatever you want with it. What I found is that by having no creative framework, by having no here's the problem, here's the solution, I kind of just spun my wheels. And by creating a framework and just dumping stuff in, maybe some of these parts don't work for you, and that's awesome. Just fix them at that time rather than trying to reinvent the wheel at the very beginning. All right, so let me tell you about a story that happened before I found out about, or I developed a simple framework. My friend Rob Walling said, Dan, I'd like you to fly to Prague to speak with my audience of entrepreneurs. And it's basically about the coolest email you could ever receive. And unfortunately, my response was to be terrified of speaking in front of people and to be scared. So I wasn't sure I could provide value. And the second thing is I was thinking back to Ian's talk, and I was like, well, I don't know if I have 2 weeks to go talk to somebody else's audience. And I know that would be amazing, but like that's 2 weeks. And I just started doing all the calculations in my head. But I realized this is the dumbest thinking ever. Why not just create a framework and put my story into it? And so I got on an airplane and ended up having one of the best weeks of the year for me. It was such a cool experience to be able to go out. And again, this is why I'm creating this, is that just by creating a simple framework, I enabled myself to visit a brand new city, brand new people, stay in my rhythm, continue to be productive, and have a total blast. And here's me with the other speakers at MicroConf. Being a speaker at the conference made all the difference. And to be honest, I was just going to fly in for the weekend to attend the show. And by stepping up and doing a talk, it made the experience that much better for me. Before I had a simple framework, my brain was like a Rubik's Cube. It was like I had like all the things that I knew in there, like podcasting and business and travel and stuff. And just having this framework for putting together slides, like, you know, everybody has different levels of competence. For me, like I can make a blog post pretty quick because I've been doing that for 10 years, but I've only done a few presentations, so I just couldn't find this on the web. You know, before and now after, I can just tell my story and I can get things done quick. I can get a first draft of, if you say to me any, you know, go make a presentation about podcasting, I can use this 16 slide framework to get done in an hour. So by implementing this simple 16-step framework or 16 slide framework, we've literally reduced the amount of time we spend spinning our wheels on creating a presentation from 2 weeks to 2 hours or so. So if you were to challenge me and say, hey, Dan, I want you to give a 15 or 20-minute talk to my audience about podcasting or about blogging or about e-commerce or whatever, we've all got those stories inside of us. So now I just don't have to worry about the framework. I can just tell the story vis-a-vis the slides. And then if you want to spend the next 2 weeks turning it into an epic presentation because it's at a really big conference or you're a perfectionist, whatever, cool, you've got your first draft shipped. And I want to be clear that this presentation is my first draft. So I'm keeping it deliberately just sort of a piece so that you could see that like I just pumped this out, and that's the point, is that you get it out the door and then you can do with it what you want. All right, so if you want to use this framework, there's some common mistakes that people make, and I just want to go over them really quick. The biggest one is that they over-rely on their slides to remember their points and put all the info on the screen so the audience reads ahead of them and it's boring. A lot of people just put up the slide just like this, and then the whole audience just like flies down to the bottom, and it's no good. People aren't even looking at you. They're just staring at the screen. So instead, I say just go, if you need a prompt, give yourself 1 word or 2 words and 1 picture. So if I want to tell myself or tell you a story about the time that I learned how to tell stories, I would do this. And hopefully it would, well, by the way, don't ever do that. That's the absolute worst. I don't know why people do this. Replace it with something like this. Just tell stories. Eventually, as you get to this, you know, people are going to get the visual vibe of your slides, and then they're going to look to you to hear that story. I think people in general overdo the biography element of their talks. So, you know, you guys, if you're coming here to this website to learn how to give a presentation, you probably don't care about what my business does. You can learn more about me anyway pretty easily afterwards. So I'm here to teach you how to make a presentation. So only bring up the elements of your biography that buttresses the before and after points. So, you know, tell the narrative story of like, or the case study of the thing that you did before and then after, but forget about the whole general here's who I am thing. Finally, detail. Detail, detail, detail. In our industry in particular, we're talking about internet businesses, and it blows me away how rarely people just take a screenshot of their website and show us like, here's what's going on, like here's the before, here's the after. So screenshot, arrows, show me data, show me specifics. The specifics really bring out the general principle that you're talking about. So if you liked this presentation, and you want to make presentations fast, what you can do to act now and take advantage of what I shared is make a presentation a day. Why not on anything? Just practice, pump one out. You can download our guide. It's right below the video. You can improve it and share. In fact, this might even be a business opportunity if you could create a bunch of different frameworks that maybe were modeled off of some of the best talks that were ever given. And it's like, well, you know, Dan, your framework is nice, but I got to give a a biography speech, or I got to give an X kind of speech. There's probably a bunch of different formats that work, and I'd love to hear how you could improve on my format. And tropicalmba.com/presentation, if you're watching this on YouTube or on another site, is where you can come to talk about this method and to improve upon it and to share what works for you. I'm sure a lot of you out there are great at making presentations, but maybe don't talk about it in terms of like what should go on slide number 7, and that just turns out to be helpful for me. Finally, here is my send away slide. So here's what I'd put up for Q&A. Put up a nice piece of photography. I'd let conference attendees know where they can find out more. Again, if you're on YouTube, come to tmba.com/presentation, and you can give me a shout on Twitter if you want to connect. Thanks for watching. Hope it helps.